Hello again, Westward Clubhouses, for want of a better expression. Michael Wagner here with another of my blog entries, and this is number 3 in my countdown of 6 things I've learned about life through writing. Number 3 is your imagination is a genius and also an idiot. Now, I've discovered an enormous amount of things just by writing, because what you do when you write is you use your imagination. Any creative thing, you're using your imagination. In fact, a lot of things you do, say with a game of chess or with any sport, you often use your imagination. 99% of chess is played in the imagination. Every now and then there's a move on the board, a physical move, but mostly it's played in your imagination. The imagination is an amazingly valuable tool because it allows you to understand and predict consequences of your actions. The bigger your imagination, the better you are at chess. And in fact, the bigger your imagination, I think the better you are at a lot of things in life, particularly what's called strategic thinking, which is that sort of thinking that happens in your imagination where you anticipate what might come next. A real believer in the power of the imagination was a fellow called Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds in all of history. Albert Einstein would get an imaginary picture in his mind, and then he would spend years trying to work out what that imaginary picture was telling him. So that's him trusting his imagination, that it didn't deliver a picture to him that was pointless and not worth thinking about. He took his imagination very seriously. If it delivered a picture to him, if it just popped a picture into his mind, then he thought, what does that picture mean? And I need to try and work out. And there was times where it took him 10 years to work out what a picture meant. But it's how he became one of the smartest human beings ever to walk the planet, because he trusted his imagination and he let it lead in his thinking. He followed it. It delivers a picture, he works it out. That's using your imagination and letting it lead. There was a fellow who wrote a book called Jumanji, Chris Van Allsburg. While Chris Van Allsburg was writing Jumanji, a little thought popped into his head, and it made no sense at the time. It was a fairly silly idea. And the thought was animals stampeding through a living room. Now, that made no sense with the story he was writing at that stage. But he was smart enough to know if his imagination has told him something, it might just be really useful. So he got it down in his journal. Very, very good idea. We've talked about journaling before. He wrote down animals stampeding through a living room in his journal, and very lucky that he did. He continued writing for months until he'd finished the first draft of Jumanji. And when he looked at it, he thought it was pretty good, but it wasn't yet great. It didn't have that specialness that publishers are looking for. Because you know what? Publishers receive good stories every day, all day long. That's not what they're looking for. They don't want to publish things that are just good. They have to publish things that they feel are great. So they're looking for specialness and looking for something that's great. And what Chris Van Allsburg had written was good, not yet great. But he didn't have that one idea that really made it great. But he got his journal out and he started reading through the journal. And in the journal, he found this note that he'd written months earlier: animals stampeding through a living room. And suddenly that idea made sense. It was like, oh, so if I have them stampeding through the living room, how would that come about? Oh, that could be because of this and because of that. And then the outcome of the stampeding through the living room would be this. And he wrote into the story what is one of the most iconic scenes in any movie for children of animals stampeding through a living room. And it became the thing that really lifted his story from good to great. It made it special. His imagination was months ahead of him. When it delivered that idea to him, it sounded like a bad idea of no use at all. It was just that he hadn't caught up to it yet. His imagination was being a genius. It was running months ahead of his brain. Eventually he caught up, and luckily he hadn't wasted that genius idea that came out as silly when it arrived. Having said that, I've also got to say, not all ideas are good. Your imagination will deliver the occasional absolute turkey of an idea. So it's time that will tell which of those ideas are genius and which of those ideas are turkeys. But what matters is lesson number 3. Your imagination is a genius and also an idiot.